guys, this is Jim Monroe coming to you again from my church office. We're going to be looking at our new quarter, one lesson at a time. And this video deals with the very first lesson, which is in the first unit, dealing with characteristics of God. We'll be looking June 1st at the characteristic of God, His holiness. And we'll be looking at Psalm 99. The entire psalm will be the lesson for the week. Let me give you a little hint. It's sometimes a little bit embarrassing when somebody in your class maybe knows a little bit more about the Bible, or maybe knows something a little different that you didn't know and points it out to you in class and embarrasses you. So I don't want this to happen to you when you're looking at Psalm 99. The whole book of Psalms is a book of songs. In fact, that's what Psalms are, or songs. And so when we reference the entire book, we use the plural, Psalms with an S. When we look at an individual chapter, we call it Psalm, Psalm 99. Too many times we'll make the mistake of saying, let's look at Psalms 99. Here's a good way to think of it. Think of a hymnal. I know we can maybe look back in our past and remember what those look like. But anyway, a hymnal is a book of songs. And so we would say that. Let's look at our book of songs and turn to Song 99. We wouldn't say turn to Songs 99. So that's a good way of thinking of that. Anyway, let's look at Psalm 99. That's what our lesson is on, the holiness of God. And the point of the lesson is God's holiness calls me to be holy. And what I'm going to be looking at in these lessons is the point. And more than that is, what will the student take away from the lesson? Now, there's a lot of great commentary in your Teacher's Quarterly, so I want you to look at that and study that. But what difference will this make in the student's life come Monday? What are some actual takeaways, some application that the student can, your students can take away from the lesson? And so a good place to start is holiness. And what does it mean to be holy? Because there are some negative connotations to holiness. You might have somebody may have talked about you one time and said that you are holier than thou, meaning that you're a goody two-shoes, that kind of thing. And so that's not what we're talking about here, of course. Holiness basically means set apart or sanctified. And that's all it means. God is holy. God is set apart. God is much different than we are. So that's a great place to start with the lesson as a definition of holiness. And so you go through the lesson. There's all different kinds of commentary on the 9 different verses. And so the takeaway is what? So what do we do with this? Why does God's holiness call me to be holy? What does that mean for me when I go to work on Monday? Those kind of things. A few scriptures I want to share with you. Some may not be in your quarterly. The first one is 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. It says, "But just as He who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy, because I am holy." So there's a command right there. That God calls us to be holy because He is holy. Now, you may or may not know this, but that quote, scripture out of 1 Peter is actually a quote out of Leviticus. Let me read that to you. That's out of Leviticus chapter 11, verses 44 and 45. "I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. Do not make yourselves unclean by any creature that moves about on the ground. I am the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt to be your God. Therefore be holy, because I am holy." So, first of all, it's a command. God commands us to be holy, to be separate, to be sanctified, to be set apart, because He is that. And so that may be a little difficult for us to do, especially on our own. How do we do that? So that's the crux of this. How can we be holy? And so that's a good question to ask the students to get some discussion on. What are some practical ways that we can be holy? Let me give you a couple of examples out of the New Testament. In Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, Paul writes to the church at Philippi, "Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure." Kind of like holy, right? Blameless and pure, children of God, without fault, in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe. So the thought is to be holy, to be different than those around you, to stand out like stars do on a dark night. And so that's Paul's command to the church in Philippi. But how do we do that? How do we practically set ourselves apart? How do we become holy? There again, another question to ask. And of course you're going to get those typical answers. Spend time in prayer, Bible study, fellowship with other believers. That's usually the top three when you ask a general question like that. As you ask that question, give it a few more minutes or seconds at least to let the question soak in, and perhaps they'll come up with some more very practical things. After you let that question percolate for a while, you might refer them to Romans chapter 12, very familiar verse here. Couple of verses out of the first couple of verses of chapter 12. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy, there's that word, holy, and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. How do we do this? He tells us in verse 2, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So that's how we become holy. That's the process of becoming holy, is to renew our minds. Don't conform to the pattern of this world. Be set apart from the pattern of this world by transforming our minds. Of course, you can ask that question, how do we do that? There are things that we can do, that we need to do. There are also things that we need to give up doing and stop doing. And so ask your students that, let them come up with some answers, and then you might have some to fill in as well. So that's all I've got for today. Next week we'll be looking at God is love. So best wishes on your lesson this week.